Hello and welcome to Girlfriends. I'm Danielle Bean. I'm a wife and a mom, and I'm on a mission to help you know your worth as a woman so you can find peace, balance, and joy in family living. This week, we are talking about ways to make every day more Catholic. This is a perennially popular topic here on Girlfriends. Can't wait to dive in. Let's get going. Hey, girlfriend, welcome to the Girlfriends podcast. If you are a new listener or new viewer on YouTube, I want to welcome you here to this space. I hope you're going to enjoy what we're sharing here on Girlfriends and want to come back for more. If you are a sometimes or always a listener, I want to welcome you back. You know, I value our time here on the podcast every week. Thrilled to be able to connect with you like this. So this week's topic is how to make every day more Catholic. This is something we've talked about before here on the podcast, but I thought it's time for a revisit. This is something that's so central to our experience of the faith, to our expression of the faith. Like, this is ultimately the goal. And what kind of comes behind this for me, like what's nudging me toward this was recently I read some scripture that kind of reminded me of the importance of doing this. And I'm just going to read this one line for you. So this is from the first letter to the Thessalonians, where St. Paul writes, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." Now, that's a familiar line of scripture. And one thing that has really stood out to me in that line from scripture through the years is that pray without ceasing, right? Like, what is he talking about here? Right? Like, it sounds impossible. And I used to hear it and sometimes think like, okay, he must be exaggerating, right? Like, he doesn't mean actually pray without ceasing. He means something else, like just pray a lot, right? Like, and because you can't be on your knees in the chapel all day, every day, 24 hours a day, right? That's impossible. So recognizing that, I think it's important for us to kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, what does he really mean then? What does he mean when he says pray without ceasing? And in recent years, especially when I was writing my book, Whisper, which is kind of along the lines of this idea of praying without ceasing, praying throughout our days. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I really came to realize, like, especially in the last couple of years, that praying without ceasing doesn't mean, as beautiful as it is, those times when we can do it, being on your knees in a chapel in front of the Blessed Sacrament all the time. It really means always being aware of and seeing things and experiencing things in reference to our relationship with God. So understanding that, God the Father created you and he desires this ongoing relationship with you. Yes, ongoing dialogue, ongoing turning to in our hearts and in our minds, even as we're busy doing work, even as we're busy having conversations with friends or doing things in our homes and our families, talking with our husbands, doing things in the workplace. Like, God wants to be a part of all of that. He wants us to invite him in. And what that looks like doesn't necessarily mean, praying an Our Father every 10 minutes. It really means interiorly turning your mind and your heart toward God in almost reflexive ways. That's the goal. That's where we want to get. And that's what we can get better at doing. So when I talk about making every day more Catholic, this is what I mean. This idea of bringing our faith into every moment of our lives. That needs to be the goal. That's what St. Paul is telling us is the goal there in that passage. He's reminding us of that, the central importance of our faith in everything we might ever experience. He wants us to be offering it to God, sharing it with God, understanding it in context of our relationship with God, just ever present God, right? Understanding what that means in our lives. And we can get better at doing that. I think ultimately that's life goals, right? Like, let's figure this out and we're going to be golden, right? But we can make small steps toward doing that. And there are really practical things that you can do to kind of bring your Catholic faith into every aspect of your life, so that it's not really a compartmentalized thing, which can sometimes be the temptation, right? To kind of compartmentalize our faith. So let's talk about them. I've got 5 different ways that I want to encourage you to think about making every day more Catholic, but you probably have some ideas of your own, and I would love to hear from you. But so let's start with the first one. The first recommendation I have for making every day more Catholic is to think beyond Sunday. What does that mean? So, you probably go to mass on Sunday and you pray to God and you're aware of God's presence there. Well, let's think about ways that we can bring our faith beyond that Sunday mass experience into our homes, into our everyday routines, into our work. So one of the most basic ways that you can do that, and this would not be the Girlfriends podcast if I wasn't saying this to you, is you need to be praying every day. You need to be bringing prayer into your everyday. And maybe you do, but maybe you don't. So I want to encourage you right now to think about what your daily commitment is to prayer and know that it is truly important to be praying every day. I really recommend in some small way, at a minimum, praying every morning and every night, at the start of every day and at the end of every day, kind of bookmarks in your day, right? This is a basic starting place that can truly do a lot toward making every day more Catholic. If you are praying every day, a very simple, no-brainer way to pray in the morning is the morning offering. You might remember I had Father Kirby, who's host of the Morning Offering podcast right here at Good Catholic. He was on the podcast not too long ago to share about the morning offering. And that is a very simple way. If you don't know where to get started with daily prayer, start there, right? You can watch on YouTube. You can get these videos, and Father Kirby shares, first of all, he walks you through praying the morning offering, just this very simple prayer, offering your day to God, which is just a beautiful prayer practice in the first place. And then shares a little reflection, all inside of 5 minutes or less, right? So that's a very doable thing, whether you're listening on audio and you're just listening to the podcast or you're watching on YouTube, just a beautiful way to just begin in that commitment to daily prayer. And then at the end of your day, a really traditional way of praying is to pray a daily examen at the end of your day. And what that looks like, so that's an Ignatian practice where you kind of look back over the last 24 hours. This is just a beautiful, like, mental health good thing to be doing anyway, right? To be reflective about your days. So at the end of each day, and praying the examen as an Ignatian practice doesn't have to be done at the end of the day. You can do it at your lunch hour. You could do it first thing in the morning. It's just looking back over the last 24 hours and looking for where God has been present in that day, looking for the things that God has given you, the blessings he's given you in that day, and, offering thanks for that. But then also looking at ways that you've fallen short, ways you might have actively chosen wrongly in your day, asking forgiveness for that, asking for the grace to overcome temptation to sin, and then making an amendment for the next day. I'm going to do better, right? Making a commitment for how you're going to love, how you're going to serve God better in the coming 24 hours. So that's a beautiful practice that doesn't have to take a lot of time. There are a lot of different examens out there. So if you Google around, if you can get an app that will walk you through it, find one that you like. If you want to make this a daily habit, like part of your bedtime routine, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, just a few minutes. Same as the morning offering, right? So if nothing else, I want to encourage you to kind of anchor your day at the start and at the end. Anchor your day in prayer as a beautiful way of going beyond Sunday for when you're praying. Because yes, of course, we need to be praying in mass on Sundays, but God is calling on us to be Catholic every day, to be his children every day, to be in relationship with him every day. And what that's going to mean is looking at your day and making sure that you have time set aside every day for prayer. And that doesn't mean it's always going to work perfectly. I can hear all of your excuses and all of your objections right now. I know them all because I've made all the excuses myself, right? I'm too busy. The kids are going to interrupt me. There's too much work to do. But make that very small commitment of time. And even if it gets interrupted, even if it doesn't work out perfectly, you've made that commitment and you can return to it. Try again, right? God knows where you are, but he's calling you to do this. Calling you to do this, even though he knows you're busy, even though he knows you have 100 things going on, even though he knows all about the kids and how terrible they are at interrupting you whenever you sit down to do something. He knows all about it. So at a minimum, look for a way to add more prayer to your day outside of going to mass, right? So the other 6 days of the week, how are you praying? And speaking of the other 6 days of the week, is there another day of the week that you could go to mass? That's a beautiful way to make your everyday more Catholic. Look up on masstimes.org. I love that website. And there's an app that you can download and it works great. It will help you to find masses near you. So I first ever used it when I was like traveling, and I wanted to look up like, where's there a church near me? And it'll use your location and tell you. And it's really great. It's very organized. And I found that it's really accurate and pretty much updated every time that I've used it. So I really recommend it. I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the show notes over at goodcatholic.com to masstimes.org, because I think it's a really helpful resource. So, but you don't have to use it only when you're traveling. You can use it right now. Like maybe your local parish that you go to, the mass times during the week don't work for you. Maybe they're all first thing in the morning. You've got other things you're committed to during that time. But if you go on masstimes.org, you can see other parishes near you and see maybe there's a noontime mass somewhere. Maybe there's an evening mass somewhere. Is there one that you could get to go to one more mass per week? That's a beautiful way to make every day more Catholic. And it doesn't have to be a big commitment. Most daily masses are much shorter than Sunday masses. You can find a way to make that work in your schedule. Just want to encourage you to kind of look at that. Where in your schedule could you fit another mass during the week? Beautiful way to make your everyday more Catholic. And then look at the other sacraments too. Could you get to confession during the week, right? Oh gosh, no, some of you are thinking, oh, she has to talk about confession, right? If you're avoiding confession, I see you. And this is your nudge. This is your reminder to get yourself to confession, because Jesus wants to heal you there. He wants to give you peace. He wants to give you forgiveness. He wants to give you very specific grace that you need for your specific circumstances and your challenges in life. He wants to give you those things in the sacrament of confession, and he cannot do it if you're not getting your butt in there. So no more excuses. I'm talking to you, right? And I understand I've made all the excuses myself, but think about it this way. When you look at like, oh, could I get to confession during this week? And you begin to consider it, and you start hearing in your mind all these reasons why this week's probably not a good week. Maybe I'll just do it next week, next time. There's always another time, right? When you start hearing those excuses, know that voice, that temptation is not from God. It's not what he wants for you, right? Who wants you to be skipping out on confession? The enemy wants you to do that. So don't listen to him. Listen to the voice of God, who is always welcoming you home, always encouraging you to come back to him, always waiting for you there. So maybe there's a time during the week. A lot of times parishes will offer kind of before daily masses or after daily masses, an extra time for confession. So if Saturdays don't generally work for you, I know most parishes have kind of the big chunk of time they offer confessions or on Saturdays. But again, on masstimes.org, that same app, I really do recommend it. You can find times that there are confession. The other thing you can find on there is times when adoration is offered. That's another way that you can kind of make a weekly commitment, if you're able to do that, to a holy hour at adoration. And doing that is a beautiful way of bringing your Catholic faith more into your everyday life. On a Tuesday afternoon, can you be making that commitment to adoration? And, wherever it is, like look it up. Maybe there's a 24/7 adoration chapel near you. If you're fortunate to have that, take advantage of that. Go during a time that makes sense for your schedule. But, look up where other parishes might have something. They might offer it just one day a week or one afternoon or on a morning. Find out one that makes sense for you and see, consider that. Consider making that commitment. Something that I really love about my weekly commitment to adoration is that it's on my schedule. It's on my calendar. So I'm doing it, right? Because if you're thinking, well, I really do want to make a holy hour, and yeah, I'll probably make a commitment to get there once a week, and you leave it at that, other stuff's going to get in the way. There's going to be always something else that kind of fills in that gap. But if it's on your calendar and you've made a commitment to go there, like signed up, and let the person organizing it know that you're going to be there on those days, then you're going to be there on those days, right? You're making it that level of priority. And that's a beautiful way to add more of your Catholic faith, more of your experience of prayer to your everyday experience. So these are all just little steps in the right direction. Maybe you're not going to implement all of them, but I'm hoping something that I'm sharing here is going to kind of nudge you toward that in your everyday life. All right. Next. Oh, okay. Also, still under this first one of thinking beyond Sunday, is to consider learning a new devotion. There might be a devotion to a particular saint that you never even heard of. There might be a chaplet or a different way of praying that you never heard of before. Do a little research or ask your Catholic friends and family, like, how do you like to pray? What kinds of things do you like to do? And you'll find that there's a lot out there that you never even heard of before. And I'm always encouraged because I love to dive into kind of the richness of our Catholic faith and our Catholic faith tradition, our prayer traditions as a church. There's so much out there, and I'm always surprised. There's always more that I never even heard of. So this is a great way to kind of jazz up your prayer life, kind of reignite that spark in your spiritual life. And it doesn't have to be a big time commitment. It could be something like a novena to a saint. It could be learning a new chaplet. Maybe you don't know how to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet or the Chaplet of St. Michael, or, one of these prayer devotions that's a little bit more obscure. Find out about it. Learn about it. Maybe make a commitment to praying it one day out of your week or during your commute or whatever makes sense for you. But learning a new devotion is another way of kind of going deeper with your Catholic faith, going beyond Sunday with your prayer life, and really just diving deeper into that rich tradition that we're so blessed to have as Catholics, where we can pray in all of these different ways. And we can be encouraged and inspired in our prayer lives by just looking at all the different ways that people have prayed for centuries. You might just invest in a new prayer book. There are lots of different versions of like different Catholic devotional prayer books that have a lot of different things in them. You might just buy one of those and just pick a different one each week or something and learn it and practice it. There might be one that you especially love. There might be some that you're like, not something I really love to do. And that's fine. That's why there are so many, right? So find one that speaks to you. Find one that you really would enjoy kind of making a regular part of your prayer routine. So that's the last way I want to encourage you to think beyond Sunday for making your everyday more Catholic. All right. The second thing I want to mention is to fill your life with Catholic imagery. This is a really easy thing to do in a lot of ways. And you can do it on a grand scale. Like you could spend a lot of money and like bring beautiful Catholic art into your home, but it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money to do this. Like look around your house. How would anybody who came into your house know that you're Catholic? Would they? Would they know? Are there crucifixes on the walls? Is there a holy image anywhere in your home? One simple way to do this is through an enthronement of the Sacred Heart. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm going to make a little note to myself because I want to share in the show notes over at goodcatholic.com. I want to share a link to the episode of Girlfriends that I did with my good friend Emily Jaminet, where she kind of explains all this. Emily has written books about the Sacred Heart. She works for Enthronement of the Sacred Heart, a nonprofit ministry that's devoted to promoting this practice of enthroning an image of the Sacred Heart in your home. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is very simply just setting up an image of the Sacred Heart somewhere in your home in a way that it's honored and kind of central in your home. And it's an active way of inviting the Sacred Heart of Jesus and his Sacred Heart, to be Lord of your home and family. That's it. And there are some certain prayers that you pray kind of at the start of doing this together as a family. There are ways you can kind of make it official. Back when we did it, we had a friend of ours who's a priest come over and he kind of walked us through the prayers. And then he had this kind of certificate for us to sign, and we have it framed on the wall next to our image of the Sacred Heart, which is kind of centrally located in our home. And I love this simple devotion, this simple way of bringing a Catholic image into the heart of our home. Really, it's just in a central place where, you walk by it several times a day. And I have found that since having that there, it's a beautiful reminder to everybody, but it's especially a reminder to me that we've enthroned him in our home. We've made him the Lord of our home. We've embraced Jesus Christ and his Sacred Heart as the king of our home, the king of our lives, the king of our family. And the image is just a tangible reminder of that. I probably wouldn't think about it nearly as much if I didn't have it there. And one nice thing that I like to do is I have a little candle holder in front of it. And if there's a particular prayer intention I have, if there's someone that I'm praying for, I'll light that candle and just remember that particular intention as I'm going about my business, working in the kitchen, walking through there, putting laundry away, setting the table, whatever. When you see that image, you're like reminded toward that prayer. And you might think that sounds a little weird. Like maybe you're like, that's kind of the thing you have in church, right? These prayer, these candles. And yet what is your home meant to be? It's meant to be a domestic church. It's meant to be an extension of your experience that happens in the church building, happening in your building, which is your home, where your family lives. So that's a simple way that you can do that. So you can check out that podcast if you're not familiar with the practice of enthroning the Sacred Heart. But it doesn't even have to be as formal or as official as that. I have a good friend who years ago kind of showed me this practice that I thought was really kind of cute and fun. And it made a beautiful thing in the end. She would find a holy image, a holy card, like a little tiny one, 3x5 or whatever. And she would frame it like with a mat in a larger frame. So it kind of became a larger thing. And just to have those around her house. She would hang them on the wall. You could have one in your bedroom. You could have one in the living room on a shelf. These are just a very simple way that does not cost a lot of money, right? A holy card does not cost a lot of money, but they can be beautiful. They can be inspiring. They can remind us to pray. They can remind us of the saints. They can remind us of Jesus and Mary and to be praying and asking them to intercede for us, right? So having something as simple as that, in your home is a tangible reminder of our relationship with God. You might have holy images that you really, want to frame in a beautiful way, maybe a larger image of the Last Supper or of a saint that you love or of the Immaculate Heart of Mary or a Mary statue like I've got back here. Along those lines, like whatever it is that you enjoy that inspires you and encourages your faith, fill your home with that stuff. Fill your workplace with that stuff. Even as simple as taping a holy card on your bathroom mirror. Like that's a very simple, low bar way to be adding a little reminder in your day to pray, a little reminder of your Catholic faith and what it means to you. For years when I was growing up, my parents would tape a typed up version of the morning offering on the bathroom mirror. Great idea. It fills your home with this reminder, especially as you're standing there brushing your teeth, to pray your morning offering. It worked really great for us. And I did that years ago when my kids were smaller. Now I still have the holy images in the bathroom. I just tape up, in the upstairs bathroom, I have a vintage one of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. In the downstairs one, I have Saint Therese and Saint Joseph. Kind of mix these up. When I get one that I especially like, I'll find a way of putting it somewhere. I keep some by the sink in the kitchen. But wherever you're going to see it, maybe you'll put it on your computer monitor. Maybe you'll put it in the car. Maybe you'll put it on a cabinet in your kitchen or on your refrigerator. Like these are just reminders of our Catholic faith. And if they're beautiful, if they're inspiring, so much the better, right? Fill your home, fill your space with these things. And another kind of formal way of doing this in your home is to set up a prayer space in your home. Now, again, I'm going to make a little note to myself to share this in the show notes over at goodcatholic.com. But we had an episode that was about creating a prayer space a little ways back. Just practical ways to do that, reasons why it's important to do that. But look for a place in your home that you can do that. That's a very simple way. You might want to add more kind of Catholic decor to your home, but then having a place that's set aside for prayer. And it doesn't have to be like you have a whole area of your home that's your chapel. I mean, great if you can do that, but most of us aren't able to do that. But just a corner in your living room or a corner in your bedroom, like this chair with a table next to it where you're going to keep the spiritual books that you like to read. We're going to keep your Bible. In my living room, I have a space that I like to use. And then nearby, there's a cabinet that has a drawer. And in that drawer, that's where I keep the books that I'm reading, the spiritual books that I'm reading. That's where I keep my Bible. That's where I keep my earbuds so that, when I'm using an app for prayer. So I keep my reading glasses. So there's no excuses when you go to pray. Everything's all together in one space. You might have a candle there. You might have a way of playing music if that's part of how you like to pray. But having all of that in one space kind of dedicated so that you're able to go there and even just seeing it throughout your day, knowing that space is set aside in your home for prayer is a beautiful way to be reminding you of your Catholic faith day in and day out, even as you're busy doing other things. It's just that little nudge, that little reminder of who you are in the eyes of God, who you're meant to be, and the priority that your Catholic faith is. So another simple way to kind of make your everyday more Catholic. One final way I want to mention of this filling your day with Catholic imagery is like, what's the screensaver on your phone? Or what's the screensaver on your computer? What are some, tech ways that you might add some Catholic imagery to your everyday experiences? I have a good friend that makes like a little part of a prayer, part of her password that she uses. Where are places that you're kind of putting in a password all the time continually? Like for me with my work computer, I've got a password, just to even log on. And if I've been away from it for even just 5 minutes, I need to log back in. What a great way to kind of add prayer to your everyday life, right? Maybe making your password some combination of the initials for part of a prayer that you want to be praying, or like the name of a saint that you want to be praying to. Just making these little things, little habits in your day, little practical things, part of how you're experiencing your Catholic faith. So finding a way to bring that imagery into your everyday experience is a beautiful way to be reminding yourself of your Catholic faith, reminding yourself of the importance of praying and who you are in the eyes of God. All right. Next up, another way to make every day more Catholic is fasting and abstinence. Now you're like, wait a minute. No. That's during Lent, right? No. That's during Lent. No. Fasting and abstinence are meant to be part of our everyday experience of our faith lives. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be fasting every day, but paying attention to the liturgical year, for sure. Fridays are a day of penance, a day of fasting. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be like not eating any food on Fridays, or, whatever that looks like for you. But finding a way to kind of make that more a part of your everyday practice of your Catholic faith beyond Lent, outside of Lent, is really an important part of embracing your Catholic faith. When Jesus talked about prayer, he talked about fasting and prayer, like those two things go together. And it truly is part of our spiritual experience. This idea of fasting, like quieting ourselves physically, or having that discipline over ourselves, over our physical bodies, really mirrors the kind of discipline and the kind of mastery we're meant to have over ourselves in a spiritual sense. And fasting is a way that we can offer up and truly supercharge our prayers. If you're fasting for a particular intention and praying for a particular intention, that's just a powerful way and a truly Catholic way of experiencing prayer. We've had a few different episodes about fasting. I'm making another note to myself. There's going to be many links in this week's episode over at Good Catholic. I want to share, we had the Catholic fasting coach on, Beth Bubick, who talked about fasting. I did a whole show once on the spiritual benefits of fasting. And, there are all different ways that you can do this. I'm not necessarily talking about just like not eating food for 12 hours, right? It could be as simple as skipping sugar in your coffee, or, something along those lines. This idea of offering up, such a Catholic idea, right? Such a Catholic concept. Important part of our Catholic identity is embracing that and understanding the ways in which God is calling us to do those things in our everyday lives, not just on special occasions, not just during the season of Lent, especially during those times, of course, but as an everyday part of your experience of prayer and the way that you relate to God. It should be a part of that. Adding fasting to and sacrifice and offering up, that concept of redemptive suffering to our everyday experiences. Now, that's going to look different for everybody, what you're able to do, what God is calling you to do. I'm not going to prescribe a particular way of doing that, but I want to encourage you to think about that. In what ways is God calling you to more fully embrace a kind of fasting in your life, an everyday way of doing penance, making up, offering up for the conversion of sinners, for our own conversion, offering up in petition for things that we're asking God for. This is part of our Catholic experience. So you might look at something in particular and you might feel called to fast in a particular way, maybe even like from a social media app that you love to use. And maybe you just want to make it an everyday part of your Catholic experience to be doing that on Fridays, or, to be doing that on Wednesdays and Fridays, or whatever you pick, whatever makes sense to you, or not using your phone during certain times, that kind of thing. But of course, the very basic idea of fasting is talking about when we put food into our bodies, right? And times in which we don't do that. And that can look different for everybody, but on some basic level, We're meant to have that experience of fasting as part of our spiritual experience as Catholics. It's it's like the other side of the coin from our prayer lives. And I think it's not emphasized enough. And I think people misunderstand it or they're afraid of it. And what I want to encourage you to do is, if you're wondering about this idea of fasting, if you're wondering, like, is God calling me to do that in some way? Just bring it to prayer. Open your heart up to the ways in which God might be calling you to go deeper in a spirit of penance or in a spirit of fasting, what he might be calling you to fast from and in what particular ways, and just be open to it and be responsive to the ways that the Holy Spirit might nudge you there. All right, again, I'm going to have links to those episodes where we kind of focus specifically on fasting in case you're interested in learning more about that. All right, the fourth way to make your everyday more Catholic that I want to recommend is read a Catholic book. I'm a Catholic author, so I have to say this, right? It doesn't have to be one of my books. But any Catholic book, like, do you read? Do you read in your daily life? A lot of people don't. And we're almost like kind of ashamed to admit that. Like, we're so involved in technology, right? But I mean, even reading on your Kindle or reading by listening on Audible. I mean, I'm talking about all of that, right? There's such great Catholic resources out there. They're the classics, of course. And I want to encourage you to consider one of those, either the Confessions by St. Augustine or the Story of a Soul by St. Therese or Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales. I mean, these are classics for a reason, right? And if you've never read one of those, maybe you want to pick one up. One way to read more often is to just keep a book like that in a convenient place, whether it's in your bag, so it'll be there when you're like sitting, waiting to pick up your kids running the carpool, or it's in your bag if you're sitting in a waiting room somewhere, or maybe you want to keep it by your bedside. So when you have a few minutes in the morning or as you're getting ready for bed or whatever, that you would pick it up then, wherever you're likely to pick it up, and then give yourself permission to read just a little bit of it at a time. That's a beautiful way to kind of work through some of these books. And maybe you are an active reader and you've got many books going at once. Like, I know I've done this before where I'll have like different kinds of books that I'm reading. Like, maybe I'm reading a nonfiction kind of self-help book. Maybe I'm reading a fiction book of some sort and a spiritual book. Like, keep those in different places in your life, right? And wherever it's going to make the most sense for you to kind of pick up that spiritual book, that Catholic book, and put it in that place so that it can become a no-brainer for you to pick it up. Allow yourself to, like I mentioned, to do just a little bit at a time. I think sometimes that gets in the way because we're like, I don't have time to read. When am I going to sit and read for an hour, right? You don't need an hour. Like, do you have 5 minutes? Can you read just part of a chapter when you have that 5 minutes? Like, pick it up and do that. I'm currently working my way through the Confessions by St. Augustine. It's been years since I picked up that book, but I'm keeping it on the kitchen counter. And when I have a moment, I'll just spend a couple of minutes just reading the next few lines, or even rereading a part, just finding a way to kind of make that a practical part of your everyday experience. Reading is just a way to go deeper in your spiritual life. And there might be a more modern spiritual book that speaks to you, a more modern Catholic author that you enjoy. Great. Get one of those. Always have one somewhere, that you're working your way through, even if it takes you a whole year to get through it. Like, that's fine. Find a way to incorporate Catholic reading in your everyday life. So that's the fourth one. Read a Catholic book. You're probably making time for other things in your life. Make sure you're making time for that. All right. The last thing is kind of a general thing. It's do a Catholic thing. Okay. What am I talking about? Well, a Catholic thing might mean joining a pilgrimage, like, joining there's maybe a group at your church that's going to go and visit a shrine, or maybe even just on your own, you're going to go and visit a shrine. Like, do you know, like, the different holy sites that are near you, the different kinds of, like, maybe Marian shrines that are around you, or maybe the Catholic place that you're going to make a pilgrimage to has spiritual meaning in a special way for you. Like, maybe you're going to make a pilgrimage, quote unquote pilgrimage, to the church where you were married, or to the church where some of your kids were baptized, or something like that. That, it just requires doing something, right? And there are all kinds of holy places that you can find that might be near you. Maybe there's a cemetery that you're going to make a kind of pilgrimage visit to that has meaning for you, for your family. Just this idea of kind of going outside of your regular routine and doing a Catholic thing, making a trip in that way, which truly is what a pilgrimage is all about. It can be something huge, like I'm going to sign up and make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, right? I mean, of course, right? But even beyond that, there are all these little ways that we can kind of do a Catholic thing, do a pilgrimage in our everyday lives, a way that kind of enhances our identity as Catholics in our everyday experiences. Another thing you might do would be like a digital experience that's going to enhance your Catholic faith. Okay, we're over here at Good Catholic. I have to mention the Good Catholic events, right? And retreats and all of these different experiences we have that we offer you digitally. So you may not be familiar with them, but if you go over to goodcatholic.com and click on events, you can see all of our different live events, the different things we have going on. We have at least 2 per month that we're doing these live events, and they've been so fun to do. And just edifying for me personally to see the people coming together, hundreds of people coming together virtually to listen to speakers talk about, practical topics like we've done, stress and anxiety, how to overcome stress and anxiety. We've done talking about temperaments. We're talking about Humana Vitae. We're talking about some of the saints, Saint John Paul II, Saint Therese, Saint Francis, how we can learn from these saints and grow in our Catholic faith. So these live events are like a nice way to kind of do something a little extra in your spiritual life. Do something a little extra to more fully embrace and learn about your Catholic faith. Just kind of an easy, low bar way of doing that. Also at goodcatholic.com that we have series, which are like courses that you can take virtually. You never even have to leave your house to be able to do this. Just sign up for one of these series and you can learn more about the sacraments. You can learn more about purgatory. You can learn more about the angels and the saints. We have all kinds of different topics that we're taking up that are kind of going deeper with your Catholic faith and can help you to more fully embrace your identity as a Catholic, as a Christian, as a child of God in your everyday experience. You might also consider in your real life just signing up for a retreat, like an in-person retreat. Maybe there's one offered at your parish. You might look into Advent options right now. I know there are some of those going around. For sure, we're going to have an Advent retreat available over at goodcatholic.com. That's going to be a virtual option, but there might be some that are in person as well. Maybe on a Saturday morning, maybe on a weekday evening that are taking place. Or you might want to go a little further and commit to doing a couple of days away with a retreat. I'm planning to attend one in November, and it's been years since I went to a retreat. I give retreats. I've done that a lot, and that's always a very enriching experience for me. But this is the first time in a long time that I have signed up, and I'm going to be gone for 3 days, and it's in New York. So I'm going to travel a little bit to get there and just spend some real time just focused on my prayer life, on going deeper in my relationship with Jesus. And there's really nothing quite like that, right? Taking time out of your everyday to kind of go deeper in your faith like that. So what are some ways, even in a mini way, that you could have a retreat? You might also do a Catholic thing by joining a prayer group, joining a Bible study, joining a women's group, joining a book club, something that's going on at your parish or at a local parish or with women in your local community, just as a way of going further, like doing a thing. Like when you sign up for a thing and you get in your car and you drive to it, or, every, Tuesday I'm going to do this thing, or on this one particular evening, I'm going to be joining this virtual event. Like that is really informing yourself about who you are and what your values are, what your priorities are, and making sure that it is clear that your Catholic identity, the fact that you are a Catholic, is an important part of how you're spending your time, how you're deciding to spend your time, how you're prioritizing the things that you'll take on in a day. So look for ways that you can kind of do an extra Catholic thing. It might be as simple as volunteering, right? Or, joining a committee at your parish. Just kind of going outside of your regular routine, the stuff you usually do. What's something a little more? Because the way that we spend our time truly does speak to what we value. I had someone tell me once that if you want to know what somebody really values, don't ask them. Just look at their calendar and look at their bank statement. Kind of powerful and true, right? Like how you spend your time and how you spend your money. That's what you really value. that's where you're investing yourself. So look at that. Where are you spending your time? Is there a way that you could spend your time that is more fully investing in your Catholic faith and growing as a Catholic? All right, those are my 5 things. So let's just review them quickly. Think beyond Sunday. 2, fill your day with holy images, with Catholic art and images, whatever way you can, big or small. Number 3, fasting and abstinence. How is God calling you to go further with that? Number 4, read a Catholic book. Make it part of what you're doing. All right. And then number 5, do a Catholic thing. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but you might have your own ideas or your own experiences to share about how to make every day more Catholic, how to make that goal of praying without ceasing. Like, what does that look like for you? How do you do that in your everyday? How are you Catholic every day? I would love to hear from you. If you're joining me here on YouTube, you can just leave a comment. If you're listening on audio, you can always email me, Danielle@daniellebean.com. Also, easy to connect with me over at goodcatholic.com, where we have so many good things in the works, so many great things going on. So I'd love it if you'd connect over there as well. All right, we've got more of the show that's coming up for you, but first we're going to take a quick break. I'm Danielle Bean, and you're listening to the Girlfriends Podcast.
All who have died in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their salvation. But after death, they undergo a purification so as to achieve the holiness necessary to actually be able to enter into the joy of heaven. We want to look at the reality of purgatory in a very clear and objective fashion, as opposed to sort of the popular notions or even the popular piety that has surrounded the actual doctrine of purgatory. Remember that no one lives alone, no one sins alone, and no one is saved alone. You and I are engaged together in the work of sanctification, my soul, your soul, and the souls of the faithful departed. Let's not forget them, but accompany them, as St. Ambrose said, all the way to the mountain of the glory of God.
Welcome back. Now we're at the point in the show where I like to share some listener feedback or a question. And this week I heard a question from listener Kendra. Kendra wrote to me, my husband and I have a 15-month-old and a 3-year-old, and we are going absolutely nuts with our 2 kids at Mass. This past Sunday, I was so discouraged that on the way home from church, I told my husband I don't want to bring the kids anymore, and maybe we should try going to separate Masses. They are both just so needy and so loud. We always wind up bringing them to the back or even outside to avoid disrupting the whole church. It's so embarrassing. And I just look at those perfect Catholic families at Mass and wonder how on earth they do it. Do you have any ideas to share? Or maybe you already talked about this on the podcast and I missed it. Thank you in advance for anything you can offer. We need help. Kendra. Okay. Yes, we have talked about this on the podcast. This is one of those evergreen Catholic family topics that we can't talk about enough, right? Because people struggle with this. So that's the good news, Kendra. You're not the only one. There are resources out there. I am going to, I'll reply to your email with a link to that episode, but I'm going to put that link in the show notes as well. This episode over at goodcatholic.com, the show notes are going to be full of these links. I've got a lot of different things that I'm sharing this week. So I'll share that was, the times when we specifically took on that topic in the podcast. But, I just want to share a couple of points of encouragement for you and for anybody else who's kind of experiencing that level of discouragement. First of all, you're not alone. And when you feel like you're saying you're embarrassed and and you're looking at these other perfect families, we're always more aware of ourselves than other people are aware of us. I promise you, you are not the level of disruption that you think you are. That said, if you're taking your kids out that, maybe there's a good reason for that, right? So I'm not discouraging you from doing that. But I do want to also say that it does get easier. First of all, your kids grow older, more able to take direction from you. Those are 2 little guys that you have. So, for sure, it's going to be tough wrangling them in the pews. But in my family, especially, I realized that as the kids got older and we had more kids, the younger ones just kind of learned from the older ones. Like I stopped having to intervene so much. Of course, there are always times when you're going to have to intervene, but it really became more of just a part of our family culture. Like, here's how we behave when we're at mass. And the older kids were setting the example. And like, yeah, we had to pour our time and effort into kind of training the older kids in how we behave at mass. But after that, it became much easier. So it's not going to be a struggle forever. And if you go on and have more kids, it's not going to be this level of crazy forever, right? And it's not going to take that level of investment on your part personally that it's taking right now with your two kids in the way that it is. So that said, you mentioned that you suggested to your husband you go to mass in shifts. You were totally allowed to do that. Like if you are feeling like this is exhausting, as a mom, maybe you're feeling like I just need to be able to have time to focus on prayer, and mass is not that for me because I'm just wrangling these kids the whole time. Like it's totally legitimate. And if it works for you guys, it's totally legitimate to go to mass in shifts. And, there were times with my husband and I that we kind of did that, but it was like, it wasn't about taking all the kids or none of the kids or whatever, but it was about like one kid who during a certain season was just the worst. And it was like, you know what? This is not a battle I want to go and fight every Sunday. So figuring out like what worked during that stage in our family life, like who goes to what mass, maybe going on Saturday and the other one goes on Sunday or whatever, like finding a way to do that, or finding childcare is 100% legitimate. With your kids being that little, yeah, there's a lot they can learn about being at church and being at mass, about how to behave there by being present there, but they're not obligated to be there, right? So like the kind of Sunday obligation doesn't apply to them when they're still so little. So finding some combination of bringing them so they're learning, but also maybe taking breaks so that it's not quite so frustrating for you might be helpful, even if it's just once in a while, going by yourself, just for your own sanity. All right. Those are just my quick tips, but I will link in the show notes over at goodcatholic.com to that episode called How to Survive Mass with Little Kids, where we kind of dive deeper into some of these ideas, share some practical tips, and encourage people to share theirs with us as well. So that will all be linked over in the show notes over at goodcatholic.com. All right, that's all the time we have for today, but I want to thank you for being here. I am truly grateful for the fact that we get to connect right here on the podcast every week. It's really meaningful to me. I mean, I love the ways that you trust me with your time, with your attention, with your questions, with your feedback. I'm so grateful for that, and I truly don't take it for granted. So know that I'm grateful for your presence here, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you again on a future episode of Girlfriends. And until next time, I hope you enjoy your day and God bless your week.